Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome an accomplished professional, an author, and all of you know I'm very partial to authors, an author from North Carolina, USA, Hanna Hasl-Kelchner. Hanna, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. It's good to be with you.
Thank you. Hanna is an award-winning author, a podcaster, and president Business MO LLC. She's an author of a book titled Seeking Fairness at Work, Cracking the New Code of Greater Employee Engagement, Retention, and Satisfaction. So, Hanna, before I start talking to you about your book, tell me a little bit about your own journey.
Oh my goodness. My journey's been a little unconventional. I grew up in an entrepreneurial family and had a front row seat to my parents' American dream. So I did learn a bit about business, whether I wanted to or not, at the kitchen table. And then my formal education includes a Master of Business and a law degree. And I spent most of my career practicing law, and the business background certainly helped me be a better lawyer. At least I thought so. My clients thought so, because we could work through issues and anticipate, well, where do you want to go, instead of they telling me I want to do X and me saying no. So we would work through issues. And it was during that time that I also discovered the importance of managing expectations and how fairness affected that. And so that combination of experiences, sort of the zigzag, is what led me to write the book, Seeking Fairness at Work. And it also informs my motivational speaking. So that's been my journey so far, and it's continuing.
Absolutely. And so let's get straight into your book. But before I ask you the first question, I'm going to ask all our viewers and listeners to go and check out Hanna Hasl-Kelchner's book, Seeking Fairness at Work. So my first question, tell me about the inspiration to write your book.
The inspiration, my goodness. Over the years, I had a lot of people come into my office and, complain about this manager or that manager. And a lot of times I was not in a position to do something about it. But, I started to untangle what it was that was causing the issue. And sometimes just them being able to have a sympathetic ear to listen was helpful to them. But still, I could see a lot of stress. And one time, one person said to me, how do we explain what's wrong with this place to somebody? Because from the outside, it looked okay. And managers, leaders have positional power. And so they can do certain things. But so the real question comes down to, just because they can, should they? What is the impact on the relationship they have with the employees? And how does that influence productivity and employee engagement? Because engagement, there's a bunch of different definitions, but if you cut through it, the main theme of all of them is it's that extra discretionary effort that people bring to the workplace, that little spark of innovation, ingenuity, productivity, that just makes everything go a little smoother. It greases the wheels. And so when that's gone, wheels start to squeak, things start falling apart, it gets a little rough, it's pushing a mule uphill. And so that inspired me. And then also an article that I had put on LinkedIn, it was sort of a laundry list of things people had told me over the years. It was titled 48 Ways Managers Abuse their power. And, most of my articles on LinkedIn had modest responses. This one went viral in comparison. And I even had one lady from Saudi Arabia contact me saying she was using it in her consulting practices. Wow. And basically giving it to the managers she was coaching and saying, how would you react if this was being done to you? And oh my God, they were like, oh, this is horrible. How could this happen? But yet these are the types of things that are often given a leadership pass because of positional power. And so that got me thinking and ruminating.
And that's how the book arrived. But, I wanted to ask you, how do you define fairness? Because, it varies in different countries, different cultures. And in the modern work environment, I'd love to get your perspective.
Well, it's interesting because fairness is a deep cultural value around the world. It's universal.
Mm,
Now, as you pointed out, the context may be different under different circumstances, because I think there's a misconception. Some people think fairness means everything has to be equal.
mm,
And there's a whole lot more to it than that, because it's really about our relationship. And as children, we understand it implicitly. We never lose that ability. I mean, you think about it, a child goes running onto the playground and they want to learn, they want to play. Okay, well, how do you play this game? What are the rules? All
mm,
right, here are the rules. Now they get started, and all of a sudden, they discover someone's not playing by the rules or
mm.
making it up as they go along.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take long for them to call them a cheater, take their ball, and go home.
Mm.
Now, something similar happens in the workplace, maybe toned down a
Yes.
little,
Yes.
because we have thicker skins and we may excuse certain unfairness, but we never lose our ability to experience it.
Mm,
And so, if I put my lawyer hat on for a second, we look at it as a social relationship and a social contract.
mhm.
It's an implied one. There's certain things we expect.
Right.
And it includes this idea of acting in good faith, which means being honest, which means physical safety. And it also includes this concept of fair dealing. Those are two covenants that are in any contract, implied, written, whatever. Those are things we expect. And
Mm,
fair dealing talks about playing nice. It's
mm,
about being respectful. It's about psychological safety. It's about a sense of belonging. And so when we have those things, we have fairness and we know when something is missing.
mm,
When it is, it causes a certain amount of hesitation and
mhm,
fear because we're not quite sure where we stand. And
mm,
it's hard to bring that extra spark when we have that level of uncertainty and
mm,
certainly fear.
Well said. And what, based on a lot of your research for your book, are some of the common misconceptions about fairness at work?
Well, one is that everything is
Everything is equal.
equal,
Yep.
which is not. But I think the biggest misconception and the one that hurts leaders the most is this concept that I call it a myth, that it's a zero sum game. That
Mm,
if I'm fair to you, I'm somehow losing something. And
mm,
in reality, it's the exact opposite.
mm,
Because if I'm fair and you're feeling recognized, you're feeling heard, you're feeling that your contributions make a difference and you're being honestly and fairly rewarded for it, you
mm,
want to work with me. And
mm,
now I've just expanded my influence with your talent and the other people that are part of the team. I
mm,
have leveraged that. And through that influence, I increase my power. I don't
mm,
diminish it. Quite
mm,
the opposite.
Well said. But you also, in your title of your book, talk of the new code. So I'm assuming
Yes.
there must be something called an old code. What do you mean by the new code, and how does it fit into today's context?
Well, the new code is a new way of looking at a lot of the literature that has already been out there.
Mm,
You know, the world of work has changed, especially after COVID. And I think that we need to have a more holistic view
mm,
of our organizations and the social contract within how we work with our employees across the board. You
mm,
know, a lot has been written about trust. A lot has been written about communications. But if I only look at those one things and say, oh, we need a communication strategy, let's send thank you notes to everyone. You know, this is the
mm,
promotion of the month type of
mm,
thing.
mm,
Well, that's really nice, but that would be like me trying to bake a cake with only flour. I
mm,
may have the most perfect flour. It is sifted, it is measured properly. But if I'm missing other ingredients, I'm still not going to have a cake.
mm,
And so the new code is to look across everything. It includes building trust. It includes communication chemistry, which is huge. It includes genuine accountability, the cultural safety net that an organization needs to have to promote it, and the structural safety net. So there's multiple pieces, and what I include is like over 100 what I call fairness factors
mhm,
that shows these things in action that somebody could say, well, yeah, maybe we could take this and start to do this immediately.
Mm.
We need to focus on that because I think organizations across the board do have these different components in place, but they may have certain strengths in one and another. But if they're not synchronized and fine-tuned, you're still going to have these pockets of unfairness that impact leaders' ability to really get the most out of their team and the talent you already have on the payroll.
Mm. But on the other hand, Hannah, and you worked in the corporate sector, I worked in the corporate sector. How does a leader balance the need for fairness with the need for performance and results?
We see, that could be another one of those misconceptions because the reality is it's not zero sum.
Mm.
Giving somebody fairness doesn't mean there's less productivity. Quite the opposite. You'll get more productivity.
Yeah.
And there's been tremendous research out there about the impact and the benefit of employee engagement, which is why so many organizations strive to achieve it. They want it. They may not be the most talented in terms of how they go about it because they haven't been trained.
Right.
They may have a poor leadership model. The organization, the structure that they're in currently may not be rewarding those types of behaviors. And so they're stuck in an old mode, which is sort of old school management, that top-down authoritarian really isn't meeting new school needs, which is why the generations are different. Some of the expectations are different from the younger cohorts. And it's important to do these things across the board because they'll take their ball and go home.
Well said. But the other aspect that I wanted to get your thoughts on was that, people say it's necessary to be transparent and communicate. And yet, when I was much younger, there used to be this term on that you need to know on a need to know basis is what we used to be told. My question is, how do transparency and communication influence perceptions of fairness at work?
They're huge. They're huge. How we communicate, the chemistry that we have. I don't think that employees expect a CEO or an executive vice president to do a full open kimono and tell them everything. I understand the need to know, but I think sometimes people get a little too tight on the need to know and don't give enough knowing to people. And some of it is because maybe they're afraid of losing their power. And again, an open mindset to say, well, here's an issue. How are we going to solve it? Inviting people into joint problem solving is certainly helpful. And this is, where I think communications is huge. And as far as encouraging employee engagement, I mean, what we say, how we say it, makes a tremendous difference. Take, for example, the word "oh." I could say "oh," and it sounds like, yeah, tell me more. Or I could say "oh," and you're going to have it's judgmental, right? And so it creates a certain energy in the room in terms of people's willingness to share, to communicate their psychological safety, and so now imagine a sentence with more words and more complex words that could be subject to misinterpretation. And you can see how in some ways you can't over communicate. Now sensitive information is one thing, but what do they need to be successful in their jobs? Because when they're successful, you're successful.
Well said. Well said. Help me understand, how does fairness at work influence overall culture and values?
Well, because fairness is a universal cultural value, the more that you can demonstrate fairness, the more productivity you get, and the more successful your organization will be. So they do go very much hand in hand.
Okay. Moving on, what long-term benefits can organizations expect when they prioritize fairness, as you outline in your book?
Well, the fairness that promotes more engagement and satisfaction, well, first of all, there'll be less turnover, greater employee retention, which is a good thing because then management doesn't have to spend as much time with the whole recruiting process. Teams have a better opportunity to gel and collaborate better because all the team members have been working with each other for a while, as opposed to bringing in somebody new which always kind of changes the dynamics, sometimes good, sometimes bad, but it takes some time. I mean, look
Mm.
at sports teams,
Yeah.
right? Getting people to play unselfishly with each other is the biggest challenge of a coach. And I think if leaders view their role more as coaches, that will certainly help. But it has tremendous value, and it's been quantified. I mean, I have it in my book as far as the numbers, the double profit, 87% less turnover, and greater profit growth compared to competitors, and earnings per share. I mean, the list goes on and on.
Mm.
It's very valuable to the bottom line.
Mm. Well said. And Hannah, what are the potential risks for companies that fail to address the issue of fairness?
Well, they'll get the same old stuff they currently have. you know?
Absolutely. You go back to status quo ante.
and they and they may have high turnover, which
Mm.
in some ways that's a mixed blessing. The other is that the people who stay may not be as fully engaged, so
Mm.
you're paying for talent you really aren't tapping fully, but you're getting by,
Mm.
and the problem is the less engaged they are, the less trusting they are. And Stephen Covey wrote a marvelous book called The Speed of Trust,
Mhm.
where he actually quantified what good communications, what the benefit is. When it's
Mm.
good, it's about a 20% productivity increase. When it's like world-class communications, he said it's a 40% increase. But
Mm.
if you don't do that, it's not like you're at zero. No,
Mm.
there's a penalty, there is a tax. And in the most toxic environments, it can be 80%.
Mm.
And so no wonder management is frustrated. You're pushing a mule uphill and it's not
Mm.
getting where. It's
Mm.
stressful. It's not productive. And so being able to take that apart and say, okay, what is happening? Why are these dynamics not productive?
Well said. And how does your book address the role of technology? And given the fact that today's work is hybrid, people are working from home, people are saying artificial intelligence is taking over work. How does your book address technology in promoting or hindering fairness?
Well, I think technology plays a tremendous role in how we communicate,
Hmm.
what method we use. And, if somebody leaves a telephone message and then the other person answers with a text, sometimes that can cause some tension. It's like, I didn't text you. If you're good with that kind of a response, that's fine. But chances are they wanted to hear a voice
Hmm.
because we get so many more signals from a voice or
Hmm.
even over a video
Yeah.
chat. you
Yeah.
know we have some other body language that we can interpret that is part of conveying information. It could be
Hmm.
about the urgency of a situation, whereas a short text, what does that tell you? That
Hmm.
says, okay, let's meet for lunch, let's meet for tea, whatever.
Yeah.
But it's not the same thing. And so understanding the strengths and the weaknesses of the different types of communication modes that we have is incredibly important.
Hmm.
um, it also impacts our reputation. I mean, some organizations think it's efficient to fire a lot of people through email. Well, that may be efficient. It
Yeah.
saves them the inconvenience of having to deal with somebody's emotional reaction, which is, oh my God, I don't want to deal with that. Um, but by the same token, what message does it send to the remaining workforce?
Hmm.
It's cold.
Hmm.
It does not have a human touch. And so it has a tremendous reputation impact.
Hmm.
As far as I think that's an area that's still to be explored. It's not something that I've included in my book necessarily, but again, what you put in is what you get out. And I think there's still going to be a lot of human judgment
Hmm.
at this stage of the game that's going to be necessary.
Hmm. And my next question is, a lot of organizations and a lot of senior leaders always say, this is how it happens here, or what you call legacy systems. What is your advice to organizations dealing with legacy issues on unfairness or inequality?
That's a fascinating topic. And I can imagine, especially for larger organizations that have a tremendous legacy, where there's been patterns of behavior that have been reinforced over years and decades, It may be a challenge to say, oh, we want more employee engagement. And so my first question to them is, how much do you want employee engagement? What are you willing to do for it? And what is your current incentive structure? Because if your incentive structure reinforces behaviors that ignore fairness, that ignore our employee-employee relationships, then you can talk about engagement all you want. You're not going to get it because that's not what you're encouraging. You really need to look at a fully loaded cost.
Right.
So that if somebody is a great salesperson, but they're making the rest of their team, diminishing them in how they communicate with them and so forth, you're getting a high performer, but part of the cost is this. Are you including that? And if that trade-off is good for you, well, then that's fine. If not, and you want to unlock and unleash this talent, then find out why this person is doing what they're doing. Is it because they need training? Maybe nobody's taught them. And that's okay. One HR professional told me, on average, a manager is 2.5 years in their management role before they get any leadership training. A lot can happen in that period of time. A lot of trust can be squandered. And once it's gone, it's really tough to get back because the employees are sitting there going, oh, I'm going to believe you now? Why? What's really changed? Yes, you went to one of those retreats and, now you're putting all your layers back on, So, those leaders would need some coaching as to how to make those incremental improvements in a way that sticks, that are credible in order to build trust back up. And sometimes trust is too far gone, in which case organizations need to make a tough decision. But it keeps coming back to how committed are they to real that level of employee engagement.
Amazing. And my last question for you, what do you hope readers will take away from your book?
Well, what I hope they take away is that fairness is a deep-seated need. It is not charity, it's smart business, number one. And number two, that with more awareness, with more leadership awareness and empathy, they can actually raise their employees' game instead of employees' defenses, and then everybody wins.
Terrific. And on that note, Hanna, thank you so much for speaking to me about your own journey. Thank you for talking to me about the inspiration to write your book, Seeking Fairness at Work. I think we covered a lot of ground on the meaning of fairness, the importance of fairness, the hazards that could be faced if you are not fair at work. And also thank you for talking to me about how fairness at work in today's context with technology, etc., is going to impact each one of us. Thank you for speaking to me and good luck to you.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.